Woman sees small house floating in rough sea. When she looked inside, she cried with emotion. Martha Wilson was walking barefoot along the fine sand when she spotted, among the waves that broke gently on the beach, a strange object floating. Approaching cautiously, Martha identified the object. It looked like a small wooden doghouse painted faded red, rocking with the motion of the waters. As she got closer, she heard a faint whimper coming from inside. "Oh my goodness!" she exclaimed, entering the water without hesitation, wetting the hem of the flowered skirt she was wearing. With some effort, she pulled the little house onto the sand, her heart beating rapidly. Looking through the opening, she saw two bright, frightened little eyes. It was a puppy, small and trembling, huddled in the corner of the soaked little house. Tears welled up in Martha's eyes as she extended her trembling hands toward the puppy. "Come here, my little angel. I won't hurt you," she whispered tenderly. The puppy, a caramel-colored mutt, looked at her with distrust before surrendering to the old woman's affection. As she picked him up, she felt his small body trembling from cold and fear. "How did you end up here, poor thing?" she asked, wrapping him in her cotton shawl. The puppy licked her hand in response, bringing a smile to Martha's face, the first genuine smile in many months. At 68, Martha Wilson lived alone in a simple house facing the sea. Retired from teaching for almost a decade, her days were filled with a monotonous and silent routine. Since her only daughter, Emily, had moved to England, taking her grandson, Michael, then only 5 years old, Martha had sunk into a loneliness that had become her only constant companion. With the puppy nestled in her arms, Martha returned home, determined to care for the small animal until she discovered its origin. "You'll be okay now," she promised, as she pushed open the rusty gate of her blue and white house, colors reminiscent of the waves that had now brought an unexpected companion. Inside the house, she carefully dried the puppy using a soft towel and offered some warm milk in a saucer. "I need to take you to the vet, but first let's warm you up," she said, watching the puppy drink eagerly. At that moment, she noticed something she hadn't before. The puppy wasn't reacting to the sounds she made, only to her movements. At Dr. Michael Peterson's veterinary clinic, a young newly graduated doctor who had returned to his hometown to open his practice, Martha anxiously awaited the diagnosis. The simple but clean office was located in the center of the small coastal town, where everyone knew each other. "Mrs. Wilson, the puppy is fine considering the circumstances," Dr. Peterson explained after the examination. "He's a bit dehydrated and has mild hypothermia, but he'll recover. However, I confirmed what you suspected. He has congenital hearing impairment. It's not complete, but he hears very little." Martha stroked the puppy's head, which was sleeping peacefully after receiving initial care. "That explains why he didn't respond when I called him. Poor thing. Abandoned and on top of that having difficulty hearing. Do you intend to keep him?" asked the veterinarian, admiring the affection with which the elderly woman treated the newly found animal. "For now, yes. Until I find out where he came from," she replied, although she felt she was already getting attached to the small animal. "But I don't know if I can take care of him with this special condition." "Mrs. Wilson, you were a teacher for more than 30 years. If anyone is capable of caring for a puppy with special needs, it's you," smiled the veterinarian, remembering how the woman had taught generations of children at the small municipal school. Upon returning home with the medicated and now slightly more alert puppy, Martha was approached by Mr. Jenkins, a white-haired gentleman who owned the local grocery store. "Oh, Mrs. Wilson, what a pretty puppy is that?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Martha told him the unusual rescue story. The old shopkeeper scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You know, that reminds me of something. There's a guy, a new fisherman in the area, that Mark fellow. He had a dog that disappeared a few days ago. You should try to find out if it's the same one." That information piqued Martha's curiosity. "Do you know where I can find this Mark? He usually docks his boat there at the Fisherman's Cove near the fish market. Green and white boat named Hope." "Can't miss it," replied Mr. Jenkins. That night, while the puppy slept curled up in a basket she had prepared with soft blankets, Martha sat on the porch of her house, looking at the sea. The moon was reflected in the waters, creating a silver path to the horizon. Her thoughts wandered between past and present, between memories of a house full of voices, her husband's, her daughter's, her grandson's, and the silence that was now only broken by the soft breathing of the sleeping puppy. Spud, she whispered, deciding to give the puppy a temporary name because of his chubby little paws. Tomorrow we'll find out where you came from. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, after preparing a simple breakfast and feeding Spud with some kibble she had bought on the way back from the vet, Martha dressed carefully. She chose a light blue dress. Her husband always said it matched her eyes, tied. Her grey hair in a simple bun, and put on a little lipstick. She didn't know what to expect from this Mark fellow, but she knew that as a retired teacher, she had a reputation to uphold in the community. On the way to the Fisherman's Cove, Martha stopped several times to respond to greetings and satisfy the curiosity of residents about the puppy that now accompanied her. Spud was comfortably settled in an adapted straw bag, his curious little head emerging to observe the movement. The cove was a colourful and lively place. Boats of different sizes and colours gently rocked, docked at the small improvised marina. Fishermen were mending nets, women selling fresh catch at small stalls, and children running barefoot through the sand. The smell of the sea mingled with that of fresh fish and local seasonings. Martha easily located the Hope boat, painted green and white as Mr. Jenkins had described. Sitting on the edge of the vessel, a young man, perhaps in his 30s, with sun-bronzed skin and disheveled black hair, was mending a fishing net. His muscular arms moved skillfully, repairing the holes in the equipment. "Excuse me, are you Mark?" asked Martha, cautiously approaching the boat. The man raised his eyes, revealing a suspicious look. "That's me. And you are?" "Martha Wilson. I'm a retired teacher and I live nearby. I heard you lost a dog recently." Mark's face visibly hardened. His eyes narrowed as he evaluated the elderly woman in front of him. "Who told you that?" Martha noticed the change in the fisherman's posture. Calmly, she opened the straw bag, revealing Spud, who looked curiously at the stranger. "I found this puppy yesterday in a doghouse that was floating in the sea. I thought it might be yours." Mark looked at the dog and then back at Martha. His face was an indecipherable mask. "Never seen that dog in my life. Mine was bigger. An adult German Shepherd. Disappeared a week ago. Must have run away." Something in the fisherman's response sounded false to Martha. Her years as a teacher had given her a sixth sense for detecting lies, especially poorly told ones. "I see," she simply replied, preferring not to confront him directly. "If you hear of anyone looking for a puppy like this, please let me know. I'm taking care of him temporarily." As she turned to leave, she noticed something fallen near the boat. A small faded blue collar, the same shade as the house where she had found Spud. Discreetly, she bent down, pretending to adjust her sandal, and picked up the object, hiding it. In her bag, she walked away from the place with her heart racing. Away from Mark's gaze, she examined the collar. There was something engraved, the initials MS, followed by a partially erased phone number. MS Mark. And what would his surname be? Martha decided to investigate more before drawing conclusions. If the puppy really belonged to the fisherman, why would he deny it? And what could have happened for Spud to end up adrift in the sea inside a doghouse? In search of answers, she headed to the municipal market, where she found Mrs. Thompson, a woman in her 70s who knew all the town's residents and their stories. "Mark Smith?" replied Mrs. Thompson when Martha asked about the fisherman. "Arrived here about 2 years ago, coming from the south. Reserved guy, works a lot, but has a reputation for not following the rules much. I've heard he fishes in prohibited areas and out of season." "And about dogs? Did he have any?" questioned Martha, stroking Spud, who was sleeping peacefully in her bag. Mrs. Thompson came closer, lowering her voice. "He always has dogs, but they never stay long. They say he trains them for something, but nobody knows for sure. The last one I saw with him was a puppy similar to that one there, but it didn't last a month." That information worried Martha. What could Mark be doing with the animals? And why did he deny knowing Spud? Upon returning home, Martha found a surprise waiting on her porch. Sarah Davis, a woman of about 40, well-dressed and with a social worker badge hanging around her neck. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Sarah, from the Municipal Department of Social Services. Can we talk?" Martha invited her in, a strange feeling making her heart tighten. "Mrs. Wilson, we received an anonymous complaint about you keeping an animal in inadequate conditions," said Sarah, taking a clipboard from her bag. Stunned, Martha almost dropped the coffee cup she was serving. "What do you mean? I found the puppy yesterday. I've already taken him to the vet and I'm taking very good care of him." Sarah observed the clean and organized environment and the puppy that was now playing with a ball of yarn in the corner of the living room. "I understand. But the complaint states that you are not in a condition to properly care for an animal with special needs and that the puppy was improperly appropriated." "Appropriated? I rescued him from the sea. He was almost drowning in a doghouse," exclaimed Martha, indignant. Sarah made some notes. "Do you know whose dog it is?" It was then that Martha realized the complaint could only have come from Mark, who apparently had changed his mind about knowing Spud. "Look at me, Sarah," said Martha, straightening her spine. "Don't you recognize me?" The social worker frowned, observing the elderly woman's face more carefully. Her expression changed, opening in surprise. "Teacher Wilson, my God, is that you? I was terrible at English, and I still remember your creative essays," smiled Martha. "You were from the class of 1997, weren't you? Always sat at the back of the room but had a special talent for storytelling." Sarah smiled, but quickly resumed her professional posture. "Teacher, this doesn't change the fact that I need to verify the complaint. It's my job." "I understand, Sarah, and I'll help." "You do your job. Let me tell you exactly what happened, and then you decide if I should keep Spud or not." For the next hour, Martha narrated the events of the past 2 days in detail. The rescue of the puppy, the visit to the vet, the conversation with Mark, and the information obtained from Mrs. Thompson. She also showed the collar with the initials MS that she had found. Sarah listened to everything attentively, her inner conflict visible on her face. On the one hand, she had a protocol to follow. On the other, she knew the integrity of her former teacher. "I'll register your testimony, teacher, but I need to verify this information, including talking to this Mark. In the meantime, the puppy can stay here, under your temporary responsibility. I'll be back in a week for a reassessment." After Sarah's departure, Martha sat in the rocking chair on the porch observing the sea while Spud slept in her lap. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and pink, colors that reflected in the calm waters. "What have we gotten ourselves into, Spud?" she whispered, caressing the puppy's soft fur. "But don't worry, I'll protect you." That night, while watching the local news on the small television in the living room, Martha was surprised by a segment that froze her blood. The reporter, an enthusiastic young man named Lucas Morgan, was interviewing none other than Mark Smith. "My dog, Toby, was stolen 2 days ago," claimed the fisherman with an apparently rehearsed expression of suffering. "He's a caramel-colored puppy with a white patch on his chest. He has hearing problems and needs special care. If anyone knows his whereabouts, please get in touch." The camera showed a photo of a puppy that was, without a doubt, Spud. Then, the reporter added, "Sources indicate that the animal may be with an elderly resident of the area who claimed to have found it abandoned." Martha felt her face burn with indignation. How could Mark lie so blatantly? First he denied knowing the dog, now he publicly claimed it and even indirectly accused her. The next morning, the story had already spread throughout the small town. When she went out to buy bread, Martha noticed suspicious glances and heard whispers. At the small market, Mr. Jenkins pulled her aside. "Mrs. Wilson, is it true what they're saying? That you took Mark's dog?" "Jenkins, how long have you known me? 30 years. Have you ever seen me do anything dishonest?" she replied, maintaining her dignity. The old shopkeeper scratched his head. "No, never. That's why I'm confused. The guy showed up here yesterday, very upset, showing pictures of the dog and saying that an elderly lady had taken it." "And didn't you find it strange that on the same day you saw me going to look for him with the dog, he denied knowing it?" Mr. Jenkins' expression changed to one of understanding. "So that's it. Look, not everyone believes him. Mrs. Thompson, is already spreading that the guy mistreats the animals he has. That gave Martha an idea. If the community was divided, perhaps she could find allies to unmask Mark and his lies. Upon returning home, she found an even bigger surprise. Parked in front of her gate was a black car with stickers from a regional TV station. Lucas Morgan, the same reporter from the previous night's news, was talking to a woman holding a camera. "Mrs. Martha Wilson," he called when he saw her approaching. "We'd like to hear your side of the story about the missing dog case." Martha hesitated. On one hand, she feared the exposure. On the other, it could be an opportunity to tell her truth. She decided on the second option. "You may come in, but with one condition. You will hear the whole story without cuts or biased editing. And you will give me the chance to show evidence." The reporter, visibly excited by the possibility of a more complex confrontation than he expected, promptly agreed. Seated in her simple but impeccably tidy living room, with Spud sleeping peacefully on the sofa beside her, Martha told her story to the cameras. She showed the collar with the initials EMS, reported how Mark had denied knowing the dog in their first encounter, and shared what she knew about the fisherman's reputation. If he really cares about this little puppy, why did he initially deny it? And how does he explain that the animal was found in a house floating in the sea? Who puts a dog, especially one with hearing impairment, at risk that way? Lucas Morgan, realizing that there was a much more interesting story than he had imagined, expanded his questioning. "Mrs. Wilson, you were a teacher here for many years. You're a respected person in the community. Why do you think Mark would be lying? I don't know his exact motivations, but I've heard he has problems with his fishing license. Maybe he's afraid that investigations about the dog might bring to light other irregularities. What I can say with certainty is that Spud was abandoned, scared, and at risk of death when I found him." The interview ended with a powerful image. Martha sitting on the porch, little Spud in her lap, looking at the sea from which he had been rescued. The serene expression of the elderly woman contrasted with the sadness in her eyes when talking about the false accusations she had been suffering. After the reporting team left, Martha allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her hands trembled, slightly as she prepared tea to calm her nerves. She wasn't used to conflicts, much less being at the center of a public controversy. "What would your grandfather say now, Martha?" she murmured to herself, remembering the wise man who had raised her after her parents' early departure. He always said, "The truth may be delayed, but it always comes to the surface, like oil on water." The phone rang, taking her from her reflections. It was a voice she hadn't heard in months. "Mom, it's Emily. I saw you on Facebook. They're sharing a news story about you and a puppy. What's happening?" Martha felt a lump in her throat. Her daughter, always so busy in England that she barely called once a month, now seemed genuinely concerned. "Honey, it's a complicated story," she began, relating the recent events. As she spoke, she realized how much she missed having a familiar shoulder to share her problems with. "Mom, this is absurd. How can this man accuse you like that? Have you thought about going to the police?" Sarah, the social worker, is investigating the case. And now with the report, I think more people will get involved. I'm more worried about Spud. He's finally getting used to me, learning to respond to my gestures since he doesn't hear well. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Emily spoke again, her voice softer. "You've already become attached to him, haven't you?" Martha looked at the puppy, who was now playing with a sock ball she had made. "Yes, honey. He filled a void that I didn't even know existed." "Mom, Michael has been asking about you. He saw the report too and was super excited to see his grandma on TV. We were thinking of visiting the States during the next vacation, but maybe we should move that trip up." Martha's heart raced. Her grandson, now 8 years old, barely knew her. The possibility of seeing him soon was like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "You would be very welcome, honey. This house has been very quiet." After hanging up, Martha felt a new energy. Perhaps all this confusion with Spud had a greater purpose than she didn't yet fully understand. The next day, Lucas Morgan's report aired on the local news. To Martha's surprise, the piece presented both sides but made it clear that there were inconsistencies in Mark's account. The reporter had done his homework, interviewing neighbors and other fishermen, many of whom confirmed that the young man had a dubious reputation regarding animal care. Martha's phone rang incessantly throughout the day. Friends, former students, and neighbors called to offer support. Among the calls, one particularly caught her attention. It was Jane Roberts, coordinator of the local animal protection group Friendly Paws. "Mrs. Wilson, we saw the report and would like to help. We've had complaints about this mark before, but we've never been able to get concrete evidence. Would you be willing to collaborate with us?" "Of course, Jane. All I want is to ensure that Spud is well and safe." "Great. We have a volunteer lawyer who can advise you legally, and we would also like to examine the puppy and document his health condition. This could be important to prove previous mistreatment." The visit from Friendly Paws was scheduled for the following afternoon. Meanwhile, Martha decided to take a walk on the beach with Spud, who was already responding enthusiastically to the gestures she had been teaching to replace verbal commands. On the beach, several people approached to meet the famous puppy from the news report. Many expressed support, others curiosity. An elderly lady, leaning on a cane, slowly approached. "I saw him, you know," said the lady with a trembling voice. "I saw when Mark's boat left on that stormy night. He was carrying a box or something similar. I thought it strange to fish in that weather. I live in that blue house on the hill. I have a view of the entire bay." Martha felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are you saying you saw Mark go out to sea with something like Spud's house on the night before I found him?" The elderly woman nodded. Yes, and when he came back, he didn't have the box anymore. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after I saw the news report." "Would you be willing to tell this to the social worker or the police if necessary?" "Of course, my dear. I'm 85 years old. What do I have to lose? The truth needs to be told. That fortuitous encounter could be the missing piece of the puzzle." Martha carefully noted the name and address of the lady, Mrs. Eleanor Baker, promising to get in touch soon. Upon returning home, she found Sarah, the social worker, waiting on her porch. Her face was serious. "Teacher Wilson, we need to talk. The situation has become more complicated." Inside the house, with Spud sleeping peacefully in his basket, Sarah explained that Mark had filed an official complaint, claiming that Martha had stolen his dog and was refusing to return it. He had presented documents, including photos and a supposed vaccination record, to prove ownership of the animal. "But that's absurd. What documents are these? They must be forged," exclaimed Martha, feeling her heart tighten. "I have my doubts too, teacher, mainly because the dates don't match up. According to the veterinarian who treated Spud when you found him, he had signs of dehydration and hypothermia that take longer to develop than the period Mark claims the dog has been missing." A ray of hope illuminated Martha's face. "So you believe me?" Sarah sighed, the conflict evident in her eyes. "Yes, I do believe you. But as a public employee, I need to follow protocols. My superiors are pressing for a quick resolution, and the initial presumption in these cases is always to return the animal to the supposed owner, unless there is concrete evidence of mistreatment." "And what would be concrete evidence in this case?" "Witnesses who have seen Mark mistreating animals, veterinary reports that prove prolonged neglect, things like that." Martha then told her about her encounter with Mrs. Baker and what she had witnessed. She also mentioned the animal protection group that would come the next day to help. "That could be useful," admitted Sarah. "In the meantime, I'll delay the process as much as I can, but I need you to gather all this evidence quickly. I have a week at most before I'm forced to make a decision." After Sarah left, Martha sat at the kitchen table, a notepad in front of her. She methodically began to list everything she would need to do in the coming days. Coordinate with the animal protection group, obtain a formal statement from Mrs. Baker, get a detailed report from the veterinarian, find other possible witnesses who could speak about Mark's behavior with animals. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Lucas Morgan, the reporter. "Mrs. Wilson, I have news that might interest you. After our report, several people have contacted us with information about Mark Smith. One of them, a former partner of his on a fishing boat, claims that Mark used to use dogs for some kind of illegal activity. He never found out exactly what, but suspected it had to do with smuggling, and more, apparently when the dogs got sick or no longer served the purpose, Mark discarded them. Martha felt a wave of nausea. That's horrible. This man needs to be investigated not just for Spud's case, but for all the other animals. I completely agree. I'm preparing a more in-depth piece on the subject. Would you mind giving another interview, this time with a greater focus on animal rights and the community's responsibility to protect them? Of course I don't mind. Lucas, if it helps protect other animals besides Spud, count me in. The following week was a whirlwind for Martha. The Friendly Paws group fully mobilized in her defense, bringing lawyer Rebecca Green to advise her legally. Mrs. Baker gave a formal statement, as did other residents who knew Mark's reputation. Dr. Michael Peterson, the veterinarian, provided a detailed report on Spud's condition when he was found, contradicting Mark's version about the time of the animal's disappearance. The story gained visibility beyond the small town, reaching regional and even national media outlets. In a matter of days, Martha, who had always led a discreet life, became a symbol of the fight for animal rights and against mistreatment. In the midst of this whirlwind, an even bigger surprise. On a sunny afternoon, while Martha was preparing lunch, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, her heart almost stopped. There were Emily and Michael, her daughter and grandson, with suitcases in hand and smiles on their faces. "Surprise, Grandma!" exclaimed the boy, throwing himself into her arms. Martha could hardly believe it. She hugged her grandson tightly, feeling tears stream down her face. He was so grown up, so different from the last time she had seen him. "We moved up our trip," explained Emily, also emotional. "Michael hasn't talked about anything else since he saw you on TV. And I realized that it's been too long since our last visit." The house, which days before had seemed so large and silent, filled with life and noise. Michael immediately fell in love with Spud, quickly learning the gestures that Martha had developed to communicate with the puppy. Emily, in turn, dove headfirst into her mother's cause, using her digital marketing knowledge to amplify the story on social media. It was Emily who had the idea to record a video showing Martha's routine of care with Spud. "People need to see the bond between you, Mom. It's the best way to sensitize them." The video, recorded with the young woman's cell phone, showed everyday moments. Martha patiently teaching gestures to Spud, the puppy's joy at understanding a new command, the special feeding care, the walks on the beach. Emily edited it all, with soft music in the background, and posted it on social media with the hashtag #JusticeForSpud. In less than 24 hours, the video went viral. Thousands of shares, emotional comments, and expressions of support flooded the networks. The pressure on local authorities increased significantly. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the office of the Municipal Department of Social Services, Sarah faced her own dilemma. On one hand, she had express orders from her superiors to resolve the case quickly, returning the dog to the supposed owner to avoid political wear. On the other, as a former student of Martha and as an ethical professional, she knew there was something very wrong in Mark's story. The solution came from an unexpected source. A colleague, upon seeing the viral video of Martha and Spud, remembered something. Sarah, that fisherman, Mark, his name appeared in an environmental police report a few months ago, something about illegal fishing in a preservation area. That information could be the key. Sarah officially requested a copy of the report, discovering that Mark had been fined several times, not only for irregular fishing, but also for cruelty to marine animals. In one incident, he was caught dragging an injured dolphin to the boat, apparently to extract parts of the animal for illegal sale. Armed with this information, Sarah met with her superiors. "We cannot return the dog to this man. There is substantial evidence that he systematically mistreats animals. If we do, we will be complicit in a crime." The case now went beyond the simple dispute over the custody of a dog. It had become a matter of environmental justice, animal protection, and social responsibility. Public pressure, added to the accumulated evidence, finally tipped the scales in Martha's favor. On a Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Spud's rescue, Sarah arrived at Martha's house with an official document in hand. "Teacher, I have good news. Your right to keep Spud has been officially recognized. More than that, Mark Smith is being investigated for environmental crimes and animal mistreatment. Martha hugged her former student, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you, Sarah. You were fundamental in this fight. You deserve it, teacher. And Spud does too. The news spread quickly through the community. That afternoon, dozens of people spontaneously appeared at Martha's door, bringing gifts for Spud, toys, blankets, special food. Even Mr. Jenkins, the owner of the small market, appeared with a new house, much larger and more comfortable than the old one. So he never has to navigate adrift again, joked the shopkeeper. In the midst of the small celebration, someone suggested something that would change Martha's life even more. You should transform your experience into a project for the community. You could teach children about animal care, environmental responsibility. The idea immediately resonated in her educator's heart. Why not? She had experience, available time, and now a cause to fight for. In partnership with Friendly Paws and with support from the Department of Education, Martha began planning workshops for local schools. Michael, enthusiastic about the idea, offered himself as a junior assistant, promising to return during the next vacation to help. Meanwhile, Lucas Morgan, the reporter who had followed the case from the beginning, proposed something even more ambitious, a documentary about the story of Martha and Spud, focusing on the importance of animal protection in coastal communities. Your story has touched many people, Mrs. Wilson. It can inspire real changes in how we treat our animals and our environment. Martha's life, which weeks before had seemed so predictable and lonely, now overflowed with possibilities and connections. Spud, who was growing strong and healthy under her care, had become not only her companion, but a symbol of resistance and hope for the entire community. On the eve of Emily and Michael's departure back to England, Martha organized a small dinner at her home. Dr. Michael Peterson, the veterinarian who had treated Spud, Sarah, the social worker, Rebecca, the lawyer from Friendly Paws, Lucas, the reporter, and some close neighbors were invited. During dinner, while observing people chatting animatedly in her living room that was previously so silent, Martha felt deep gratitude. Spud, comfortably lying under the table between her feet, seemed equally satisfied with the direction their lives had taken. At one point, Emily asked for everyone's attention, raising her glass. I want to make a toast to my mother, who not only saved Spud, but initiated a movement that is transforming this entire community. And I also want to officially announce, we're coming back to the States. Michael and I decided that it's past time for us to be closer to family. The revelation completely surprised Martha. Her heart felt like it was going to explode with joy. But what about your job in England? She asked, hardly believing what she was hearing. I've arranged a transfer to work remotely. We'll live in Boston, just 2 hours from here. We can see each other every weekend, and Michael can participate in your project with the schools. The good news sealed what was already shaping up to be a new chapter in Martha's life. The house that once seemed too big for one person was now preparing to receive frequent visits. The silence that once weighed like a dark cloud would regularly be broken by laughter, conversations, and the sound of Spud's paws running through the yard. 3 months after the storm that carried a doghouse adrift to the beach where Martha was walking, the small coastal town had been transformed. Signs of no to animal abandonment could be seen everywhere. Friendly Paws, once a small group with limited resources, now had dozens of volunteers and regular donations. Schools had incorporated into their curricular topics related to animal and environmental protection. On a particularly sunny afternoon, Martha was again on the beach where it all began. Spud, now larger and stronger, ran happily through the sand, promptly responding to the gestures she made to guide him. In the distance, she could see a group of children approaching. It was her first class from the Paw Friends project, an initiative that brought environmental education to public schools in the region. While waiting for the children, Martha reflected on how her life had changed drastically in such a short time, from loneliness to purpose, from silence to action, from routine to adventure. All because that morning, Her eyes had caught something unusual floating among the waves. "Grandma, look who's here!" shouted Michael, running toward her. The boy had arrived the day before with Emily for a weekend visit, the first of many that would come after the family's definitive move to Boston, scheduled for the following month. Behind him came the children from the project, all eager to meet the famous Spud and hear his story directly from Teacher Wilson, as she was now known throughout the region. Sitting in a circle on the sand, with Spud in the center receiving attention from all sides, Martha began to tell the story that was now almost a local legend. "It all started on a morning like this, when I spotted a doghouse floating in the sea." The children listened fascinated, their eyes shining with emotion and curiosity. Michael, sitting next to his grandmother, occasionally added dramatic details to the narrative, to the delight of the young audience. At the end of the story, one of the children raised her hand. "Teacher Wilson, what happened to the bad man who mistreated the puppies?" Martha smiled gently. "He is answering for his mistakes, but the most important thing is that now our town is more attentive, more united, so that things like this don't happen again. Each of you can be a guardian of animals and nature." "Like Spud is your guardian now, right?" asked another boy. "Exactly. Spud showed me that it's never too late to start again, to find a new purpose. Sometimes life brings us surprises in the most unexpected packages." After the session with the children, Martha, Michael, and Spud walked slowly back home, stopping occasionally for the boy to collect shells he found especially beautiful. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected in the calm water. "Grandma," said Michael suddenly, "you're like a hero, you know, like in those movies I watch." Martha laughed, stroking her grandson's hair. "No way, my love. I'm just an old teacher who did what anyone would do." "No, Grandma, not everyone would have saved Spud. Not everyone would have fought for him. You're special." Those simple words, spoken with the sincerity that only a child possesses, deeply touched Martha's heart. Perhaps her grandson was right. Perhaps there was indeed something special in not giving up, in believing that a small gesture can trigger great transformations. When they arrived home, they found Emily on the porch, talking animatedly on the phone. Seeing mother and son approaching, she waved enthusiastically. "Mum, you won't believe it. I just spoke with the documentary producer. They want to expand the project to a full series about animal protection initiatives in coastal communities, with your case as the pilot episode. It will be broadcast nationally." The news was surprising. What had begun as a small local documentary was now taking on much larger proportions. "But why? Our story is so simple," questioned Martha, genuinely surprised. "That's exactly why, Mom. It's a real authentic story that shows how small actions can generate big changes. That's what people want to see and hear these days. Stories of hope and transformation." That night, lying in her bed with Spud at her feet, Martha looked out the window at the moon that illuminated the sea. The same sea that, months earlier, had brought her much more than a frightened puppy inside a floating house. It had brought a new chapter, a new chance, a new life. "Who would have thought, Spud," she whispered to the dog, watching her with attentive eyes, "that you would change my life in so many ways?" The puppy, as if understanding, approached to affectionately lick her hand. He didn't need to hear to understand the deep bond that united them. A bond that had begun with a rescue, but that now was a partnership of mutual care and unconditional love. In the following year, the small coastal town inaugurated its first animal welfare center, affectionately named Spud's House. The space, built with donations and volunteer work, offered free veterinary care for animals from low-income families, in addition to promoting responsible adoption campaigns and educational programs. Martha, now a well-known figure throughout the region, was invited to cut the inaugural ribbon. By her side were Emily, Michael, Spud, now a healthy and happy adult dog, and dozens of supporters who had followed her journey from the beginning. "I never imagined while walking on the beach that morning that I would find much more than a puppy in need of help," Martha addressed the crowd present. "I found a new purpose, new friendships, and the chance to make a difference in the lives of many animals and people." Spud was not only rescued, he became a rescuer, bringing back my family, my voice, and my desire to continue building a better world, even in my retirement years. The documentary series about animal protection initiatives with Martha and Spuds, story in the premiere episode, was a national success, inspiring similar projects in various regions of the country. What was once a small local cause had become a broad movement, connecting people of different ages and backgrounds around a common goal. Emily, definitively established in Boston with Michael, visited her mother every weekend. On one of these visits, she brought an unexpected proposal. "Mum, what do you think about us writing a children's book together telling Spud's story? It could be used in schools as educational material." The idea quickly flourished. With Martha's pedagogical experience and Emily's talent for communication, the book Spud and the Floating House was published the following year, becoming part of the teaching material not only in the region's schools but throughout the state. In one of the book signing sessions at the small local bookstore, an elderly lady timidly approached Martha. "You probably don't remember me," she said with a trembling voice. "I was your student more than 40 years ago." Martha looked carefully at the wrinkled face in front of her, searching her memory. "Mary Johnson?" she risked, surprising the lady with her still sharp memory. "Yes, I can't believe you remember." "How could I forget? You always brought abandoned animals to the classroom, wanting to save all of them," smiled Martha. The two talked at length about the old days and about how life had led them down different paths until that significant reunion. Mary, now retired, like Martha, offered to volunteer at the Spuds House Center. "You were always my inspiration, teacher, and now with this incredible story, you continue to inspire people of all ages." That comment made Martha reflect on the circles of life, on how our actions can echo through time in ways we never imagined. At home that night, while watching Spud and Michael playing in the yard under the starry sky, Martha felt a deep peace. Her life had transformed completely in just over a year. From loneliness to belonging, from emptiness to purpose, from silence to an active voice in the community. All because, on that seemingly ordinary morning, her eyes caught something unusual, floating among the waves. And her heart, even marked by age and loss, was still open enough to embrace a new beginning. Spud, noticing her contemplative gaze, approached and laid his head in her lap, seeking affection. Martha smiled, caressing the soft ears of the animal, that had become much more than a pet. He was a symbol of resistance, hope, and transformation. "Thank you, my friend," she whispered, "for reminding me that it's never too late to make a difference, that it's never too late to find a new meaning, that it's never too late to love again." The dog looked at her with that pure devotion that only animals can express. He didn't need to hear perfectly to understand what that woman meant in his life. Just as she had rescued his life from the waters of the sea, he, without knowing, had rescued her heart from the sea of loneliness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 2 years after the fateful encounter on the beach, Martha celebrated her 70th birthday in a way she never would have imagined, surrounded by friends, family, and admirers of her work with Spud's House, which had already rescued and found homes for more than 200 animals. The party, organized by Emily and Michael, took place in the yard of her home, decorated with flowers from the garden that she now cultivated with her grandson's help. Spud, wearing a blue bow tie especially for the occasion, circulated among the guests like a true host, accepting treats and caresses from all sides. Among those present was Sarah, the social worker who had become a close friend, Dr. Michael Peterson, the veterinarian who continued to care for Spud and now coordinated care at the Animal Welfare Center, Lucas Morgan, the reporter whose coverage had been fundamental in giving visibility to the cause, and dozens of volunteers, former students and residents who had followed the transformation of that once lonely lady into a community leader admired by all. "A toast to the most amazing mother in the world," proposed Emily, raising her glass, "who taught us that a single act of compassion can change not just one life, but an entire community." As the guests toasted, Martha felt a deep emotion. She looked around at those people who had become part of her life, at her daughter who now lived close enough for them to have dinner together every week, at her grandson who was growing up with values of compassion and respect, at Spud who had been the catalyst for all this transformation. "I want to thank all of you for being here today," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "But mainly I want to thank a very special friend who taught me that new beginnings can happen at any age." Everyone looked at Spud, who, as if understanding, they were talking about him, perked up his ears and barked once, provoking emotional laughter from the audience. "Spud showed me that even when we think our story is ending, new chapters can emerge in completely unexpected ways," continued Martha, "and that it's never too late to make a difference, never too late to learn, never too late to love." After the emotional applause, the party continued lively, with music, food, and many shared stories. At one point, Michael approached his grandmother with a carefully wrapped package. "Grandma, I made this for you." Martha opened the present, finding a handmade album. On the cover, a photo of Spud and her on the beach where they had first met. Inside, dozens of photos documenting the 2 years of their journey together. The rescue, the protests to keep the dog, the founding of the Animal Welfare Center, the visits to schools, the book launches, everyday moments of affection between the two. "Michael, this is wonderful," exclaimed Martha, hugging her grandson tightly. "There's one more thing, Grandma," said the boy, turning to the last page of the album. There was a drawing made by him, a colorful and childish representation of young Martha, standing in front of a classroom. Below the drawing, in carefully traced letters, was written, "When I grow up, I want to be like my grandmother, someone who teaches, protects, and makes a difference." Tears flowed freely down Martha's wrinkled face. This was, without a doubt, the most precious gift she could receive. Knowing that her example had touched her grandson in such a profound way was a form of immortality she had never imagined. That night, after all the guests had gone and the house had returned to silence, but now a comfortable silence full of happy memories, Martha sat in her rocking chair on the porch, with Spud lying at her feet as usual. Contemplating the sea that stretched before her home, the same sea that had brought that doghouse floating 2 years ago, she felt a deep gratitude for the unexpected turn her life had taken. "You know, Spud," she said, knowing that the dog could feel the vibrations of her voice even without hearing perfectly. "They say that life begins to end when we retire, but mine was just waiting for you to truly begin." The dog raised his head, looking at her with those eyes that expressed understanding beyond words. Then he settled back at her feet, a loyal and loving guardian. Martha continued gently rocking in the chair, listening to the sound of waves breaking on the beach. She remembered how she used to walk alone on that sand every day, without purpose, just to fill the empty hours of her days. Now she barely had time for all the activities, projects, and people that filled her life. She smiled, remembering what her grandfather always said, "Martha, God writes straight with crooked lines." Sometimes what seems like a detour in the path is actually the true destination. The doghouse floating adrift in the waters of the sea had been her detour, a detour that had led her exactly to where she needed to be, although she never knew she was looking for it. The next morning, as had become her custom over the past 2 years, Martha and Spud walked together on the beach. The dog ran happily through the sand, occasionally returning to check if she was following him. Her hand gestures were all he needed to understand her intentions in a silent language they had developed together. The beach was almost deserted at that hour of the morning, except for some fishermen returning with their boats and nets after night fishing. Martha observed the approaching boats, remembering how she used to see them as mere elements of the landscape before. Now she knew the names of many of those men, their stories, their families. Her connection with the community had deepened in ways she never imagined possible. In one of the boats, she recognized a familiar face. It was Tim, Mark's younger brother, the fisherman who had caused so many problems at the beginning of Spud's story. Unlike his brother, Tim was known for his kindness and honesty. After the scandal involving Mark, who ended up losing his fishing license and leaving town, Tim had suffered from the prejudice associated with the family name. It was Martha who surprisingly extended a hand to the young man, inviting him to share his experience with the children of the educational project, showing how responsible fishing could coexist harmoniously with environmental protection. That gesture not only helped rehabilitate Tim's image in the community, but also gave him a greater purpose than simply continuing the family fishing tradition. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson," shouted Tim from the boat, waving enthusiastically. "I brought a fresh fish for Spud." "He'll love it, Tim," replied Martha with a smile. As she walked back home, she thought about how unpredictable life was. If someone had told her 3 years earlier that she would be walking on the beach alongside a partially deaf dog she had rescued from the sea, that she would be known throughout the region for her work with animal protection, that she would have a published book and an animal welfare center named in honor of her pet, that her daughter and grandson would be living nearby again, and that she would be helping to rehabilitate the reputation of the brother of the man who tried to cause her so many problems, well, she would have thought that person was completely crazy. Yet there she was, living exactly that improbable reality. A reality that had begun with a simple gesture of compassion when, without hesitation, she entered the sea to rescue a frightened puppy. Upon arriving home, she found Michael already awake, preparing a simple breakfast. The boy, now 11 years old, spent more and more time at his grandmother's house, learning about plants, animals, and the stories Martha loved to tell about her years as a teacher. "Good morning, Grandma. I made coffee for both of us and set aside Spud's special food. Oh, and Mum called. She'll arrive later with those university volunteers who want to learn about the project." Martha smiled, proud of the responsibility and autonomy her grandson demonstrated. "Thank you, my love. Tim sent a fresh fish for Spud. Want to help prepare it?" The two spent the morning in a pleasant domestic routine, interspersed with preparations for receiving the afternoon visitors. The Spud's House Center had sparked the interest of university students of veterinary medicine, biology, and social work who saw in it a model of community integration and environmental education. While Michael helped arrange chairs in the IZ yard for the meeting, he suddenly asked, "Grandma, do you believe in destiny? Like, was it written in the stars that you would find Spud that day?" Martha stopped what she was doing, considering her grandson's philosophical question. "You know, Michael, I don't know if I believe in a predetermined destiny where everything is already written, but I believe that life presents us with opportunities, crossroads, moments of decision, and what we do in those moments, the choices we make, can completely change the course of our story. Like when you decided to enter the water to save Spud, even without knowing what was inside the house. Exactly. I could have simply ignored it, could have called someone younger to check, could have been afraid. But something inside me made me act at that moment. And that small decision, which seemed insignificant at the time, ended up changing not just my life but that of many other people and animals." Michael thought for a moment, absorbing the wisdom of his grandmother's words. "So destiny is like a door that appears in front of us, but it's up to us to decide whether to open it or not." Martha smiled, impressed by her grandson's insight. "That's a very beautiful way to think about it, Michael. Yes, destiny presents us with doors, but it's up to us to have the courage to open them, even without knowing what will be on the other side." In the afternoon, the house filled again with people. Emily arrived with a group of enthusiastic university students eager to learn more about the project they had studied in their social responsibility classes. Martha's small living room could barely hold so many people, but no one seemed to mind the squeeze. Spud circulated among the visitors, receiving affection from all sides and seeming to perfectly understand his role as mascot and inspiration of the project. During the presentation, Martha shared not only the practical aspects of the work developed at the Animal Welfare Center, but also the philosophy behind it, the idea that small actions of compassion can generate waves of transformation in an entire community. What began as a simple rescue of a single animal expanded into a movement that has already impacted hundreds of lives, both human and animal, she explained. And all this happened not because we had great resources or power, but because ordinary people decided they could make a difference, one paw at a time. The students listened, fascinated, taking notes and pictures. A young veterinary student timidly raised her hand. "Mrs. Wilson, did you have any experience with animal protection before finding Spud? Any special training?" Martha smiled, stroking the head of Spud, who had settled at her feet. "No, dear. I was just a retired teacher living a rather lonely and monotonous life. I had never participated in any animal protection movement, nor did I have specific knowledge about the subject. What I had was just one thing: the willingness to help when I saw someone in need. And were you never afraid? Of confronting the fishermen, of going against the authorities, of taking on all this responsibility at your age? The question, asked with genuine curiosity, made Martha reflect for a moment. Of course I was afraid, many times. But you know what I discovered? That fear doesn't disappear when we do something important. It just shares space with something stronger: the conviction that we're doing what's right. Her words resonated deeply, not only among the young students, but also in her own heart. Indeed, fear had never completely disappeared throughout that journey. There were moments of doubt, of insecurity, of questioning if she would have the strength to continue facing so many obstacles. But each time she looked at Spud, at the unconditional trust in his eyes, she found the courage to take one more step. After the visitors left, Martha, Emily, and Michael had dinner together on the porch, observing the sky that gradually filled with stars. Spud, exhausted after so much attention, slept peacefully in his special bed, occasionally emitting small snores that made everyone smile. "Mom," said Emily thoughtfully, "have you ever imagined what your life would be like if you hadn't found Spud that day?" Martha looked at the dark sea in the distance, the sound of waves breaking gently on the beach. "Sometimes I think about that. I would probably continue my silent routine day after day, waiting for time to pass. Maybe you would never have returned to the States. Maybe I would never have used my teaching knowledge for something meaningful again. So many maybes. It's strange to think that an entire life can change because of a fortuitous encounter." "Isn't it?" reflected Emily. "But it wasn't just fortuitous," intervened Michael, surprising both women with his perception. "Grandma had to choose to enter the water. She had to choose to take Spud home. She had to choose to fight for him when the fisherman appeared. There were many choices, not just a chance encounter." Martha looked at her grandson with admiration and pride. Michael is right. Life presents us with opportunities, but it's up to us to seize them and transform them into something meaningful. That night, lying in her bed with Spud at her feet as usual, Martha mentally revisited the events of the past years. As a retired literature teacher, she couldn't help but see her own story as a narrative full of twists, challenges, and redemption. She had been antagonist and protagonist, had faced obstacles and found unexpected allies, had doubted and believed, had lost and found. And at the center of it all was a small four-legged being who, without saying a word, had taught her, and so many others, profound lessons about compassion, perseverance, and new beginnings. "Spud," she whispered to the dog, who raised his head, attentive to the movements of her lips even without hearing perfectly. "You really changed everything, you know? And I have the feeling we still have many adventures ahead." As if understanding, the dog got up, walked to the head of the bed, and affectionately licked Martha's face before returning to his place. That simple gesture said it all. They were together on this journey, partners in a story that continued to unfold with each new day. On the wall opposite the bed, framed in a simple frame, was the first page of the book they had published together. The illustration showed a blue doghouse floating in the sea, with a small curious muzzle appearing at the opening. Below, in colorful letters, it read, "Spud and the Floating House, a story of mutual salvation." That's what her story with Spud really was. Not just the rescue of a dog by a woman, but also the rescue of a woman by a dog. A mutual salvation that, like waves expanding from a stone thrown into the lake, had touched family, friends, community, and now reached people who didn't even know them personally. With that comforting thought, Martha fell asleep, lulled by the sound of waves from the same sea that 3 years earlier had brought her much more than a frightened puppy. It had brought a new chapter, a new chance, a new life. The next morning, upon waking with the first rays of sunlight entering through the window, Martha felt renewed energy. There was something special about that day, a feeling that something important was about to happen. Spud was already awake, watching her attentively, as if sharing the same intuition. "Good morning, my friend," she smiled, making the gesture that meant breakfast in her particular language with the dog. Spud immediately jumped off the bed, ready to start another day of adventures alongside his favorite human. While preparing her coffee, Martha was surprised by the phone ringing. It was Sarah, the social worker, with exciting news. "Teacher Wilson, I have wonderful news. Remember that municipal animal protection bill we started discussing after your case? It was finally approved! From next month, we'll have the Spud Law, which establishes more severe punishments for mistreatment and abandonment of animals in our region." The news was better than Martha could have imagined. What had begun as a personal struggle to protect a single dog was now transforming into legislation that would protect countless other animals in the future. "Sarah, that's wonderful. I don't even know what to say." "Say that you'll participate in the bill signing ceremony at City Hall next week. The mayor insists on your presence, and Spud's too, of course." After hanging up, Martha sat down, feeling her legs trembling with emotion. A law with Spud's name. Who could have imagined that that frightened puppy found floating in the sea would become a symbol of such significant change? She went out to the porch, needing fresh air to assimilate the magnitude of that news. The sea was calm that morning, reflecting the blue sky like a perfect mirror. Spud followed her, sitting by her side, his presence a comforting anchor amid the storm of emotions. "You know, Spud," she said, caressing the dog's soft ears, "when I was young, I dreamed of changing the world through education. I spent decades teaching children to read, write, think critically, and I thought that upon retiring, my contribution had come to an end. But now I realize that life had other plans for me, for us." Spud looked at her with that expression of understanding that transcended the need for words or perfect hearing. It was as if he were saying, "We're just beginning, human, just beginning." And they really were. The approval of the Spud Law was just the most recent chapter in a story that continued to unfold in surprising and inspiring directions. A story that had begun with a simple act of compassion on a seemingly ordinary morning, when a retired teacher decided to enter the sea to rescue a drifting doghouse. A story that, as Martha herself liked to tell the children who visited the Spud's House Center, reminded us that it's never too late to make a difference. Never too late for a new beginning. Never too late to open the heart and arms to the unexpected that floats to meet us on the waves of life. End of story. And to you who followed us to the end, how about sharing what you thought of this touching story? Have you ever rescued an animal or know someone who had their life transformed by a pet? Tell us in the comments, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart.